Video game endings. A necessity. You can't have a game without it. Right? Well, part of the journey is the end, and as a developer, you really need to stick the landing. This goes for any other artistic medium as well. I mean, this painting's ending was terrible. A bad ending can completely ruin your experience, because even if you were having a good time before, well, this is your last impression. If you have a guest home, even if you cook him a 5-star meal, he's gonna leave pissed if by the end you kick him in the balls. So, controversial statement coming, endings are important. They tie together the themes of your story, show where your characters will be for the foreseeable future, and you really need to have a good one. After all, a story can only end once, right? Introducing multiple endings. Because you can't just have one, sometimes the game will let you, the player, influence how its story goes. Some of them take it a step further and can branch into completely different story threads, situations, bring in different characters. You could play these games multiple times and get a wildly different story every time. But that is usually reserved to those choose-your-own-adventure type deals, like the Telltale or Quantic Dream games. Usually branches in stories tend to be more minimal, like maybe one of your party member dies in Fire Emblem, or you miss a side quest in Zelda, or you don't get to see a specific cutscene that can only be found in a far-off place in an open-world game. Point being, all these events tend to happen adjacent to the main story, only side characters can die, you can't miss important cutscenes, and so on, and this makes a lot of sense. Games are hard to make, they take a lot of time, and adding a new item or mechanic can create 37 game-breaking bugs that you need to fix before you move on to the next one. And even then, nowadays most people aren't interested in replaying their games. Looking at Steam achievements, it's hard enough to get people to play their games once. Have you seen the size of gaming backlogs lately? But even if you have no plans on replaying or getting other endings, it's still neat to know that you got a specific ending tailored just for you. It makes your playthrough feel more personal. The game ended this way because you wanted it to. But there's many reasons why a developer might want to have multiple endings in their game. Maybe it's a super in-depth RPG where you can customize every little aspect of your playstyle and character and make decisions along the way, so locking you to one ending just feels wrong. Maybe the game has something to say about the player based on the choices you make, which most of the time boils down to, do I want to be a good person, or do I shoot the children? Maybe the ending is all about siding with different characters and that's the whole appeal of the game. But overall, I believe most games with multiple endings can fit within one of the following categories. These are the games that, yes, have multiple endings, but that's because they have multiple stories. Usually it tends to be the same plot, but changing depending on the character you choose to play as. In Resident Evil 2, there's this mechanic called AB scenarios, where to get the full story of the game, you have to complete it twice, once as Leon Kennedy and once as Claire Redfield. Each of them gets their own story. But the ending of the game also changes slightly depending on who you play as first. Fire Emblem 3 Houses might be a better example. You have 4 main routes to choose from, making you a teacher of one of the houses in the game. And whilst half of the game is pretty similar across the board, after a time skip, these stories stray so much from each other that each of them could easily be the main story of their own game. But barring a route split in the Red Eagles route, the ending of the game is locked once you choose which house you want to lead. So, games like these aren't multiple endings as much as they are multiple stories. Find the thing endings are those in which, while the game has a main, easy-to-get ending that you'll get by just beating it normally, it will usually be a bad or bittersweet ending that, while having a sense of finality, it lets the player know that they missed something. These are some of the most common types of multiple ending, and have been around for years. The earliest example I can think of is Sonic the Hedgehog, where if you just beat all the stages, you'll see the end of the game, but Eggman will be there mocking you for not getting all the Chaos Emeralds. So after you get them, you will be rewarded with well, it's a reward. Later games would give a better incentive with the addition of Supersonic, an unlockable super form that makes the levels piece easy. Keep in mind that these games were made with the idea of being replayed, so having hidden collectibles for you to find in subsequent playthroughs was a smart choice to keep the game more live. Later for the PlayStation, Silent Hill would have a similar mechanic, where if you just play it like a regular survival horror and beat the game as is, you get an obviously bad ending where the main character dies. But if you do a secret side quest, you can save your daughter and have the happy canon ending of the game, which leads to Silent Hill 3. In Nier, no matter what you do the first time you beat the game, you'll get Ending A, which is a serviceable standard RPG ending where you save the day and all is good, but you really need to get all the endings, not only because Ending A is not complete, but because you just won't understand the story if you don't. Now Nier is a special case because you can't change the ending the first time you beat the game, or the second one, but in order to finally unlock the real ending, you need to get every single weapon in the game. But Nier is a special case, because it also fits under these are games in which the story doesn't branch out until you get to the point where you need to make a choice. For example, in GTA 5 there are 3 different endings depending on whether you kill one of your friends or ally with them to kill the main bad guy. The entire story of the game is the exact same every time, except for that one final choice. Spec Ops: The Line does something similar. Once the game reveals its main twist, you can either choose to shoot this guy or yourself. If you shoot yourself, that's the end of it, but if you don't, there's a sequence where these soldiers come to rescue you, and there are multiple endings within it. You can either walk peacefully towards them, fight them and die, or kill every one of them. And every single one of these endings works narratively for the character and story of the game, and it being a standalone without any sequels, any ending could be considered canon, all of them equally valid.
Welcome to Dubai.
The Dark Souls games have different endings too. Once you beat the final boss of the games, you can either link the fire to keep the Age of Fire going, or let it die, sending the world into an Age of Darkness. Metal Gear Solid 1 has multiple endings, just barely. While overall the events play the same, if you surrender during this torture sequence, the character Meryl will die, and your partner when you finish the game will be Otacon. But if you succeed, Otacon will escape by his own means, and Meryl will be the one helping you out. In this case, the Meryl ending is canon, due to her character being alive in subsequent entries, and from a gameplay perspective, it makes sense having the real ending harder to get. And going back to Nier, after beating the story 3 times, and if you collected all the weapons in the game, you are prompted to make a choice that either ends the game then and there, or leads to a secret way to unlock the true ending of the game, ending E. I won't be going into details of the story, because I may dedicate a whole video to this game in the future. Nevertheless, Nier is an interesting mix in the way it chooses to handle its multiple endings, and while it's undoubtedly tedious to get through, it's still neat nonetheless. These are those games in which the ending changes depending on how much of a bastard you choose to be. The golden rule says that before you harm your fellow man, ask this question first: how would you wish that he treat you if your fortunes were reversed? So naturally, choosing to be a meanie will often result in a bad or evil ending, but these choices tend to be tremendously obvious. Like in Bioshock, you're presented with a choice: either save the innocent girl or harvest her for profit. If you decide to follow the steps of Nestle, you will get the bad ending in which you become an evil dictator and steal nuclear weapons to wage war against the outside world. If you choose to have a heart and cure their little sisters, the game will end with you escaping rapture with them and giving them happy lives. But come on, if we're talking about multiple endings based on morality, there is probably no better recent example than Undertale. The multiple endings are so iconic that if you hear somebody say neutral, pacifist, and genocide, you know exactly what they're talking about. But for the 3 people in the back that managed to go a decade without hearing of Undertale, in Undertale, there are 3 main endings/routes you can choose to play. In the neutral route, you can play it as a basic RPG, defeating the monsters as you find them and making your way through the end. If you do this, the game will treat it as a you did what you had to survive, and the main character gets to return home, while the monsters stay trapped in the underground. The pacifist route requires you to beat the entire game without killing a single enemy. This will lead you to the neutral ending. However, if you didn't kill anyone, you will be allowed to reload your save, and after finishing IP requirements and beating the true final boss, you will unlock the true pacifist ending, often considered the canon ending of the game, being the only one that will show you the full credits. This is of course the most satisfying narratively, because you get to see the most amount of content, and it's a happy ending that leaves all the characters with a bright future ahead. But as we all know, there is a third choice. The famous genocide route requires you to not only kill all the enemies you find, but actively go out of your way to kill every single enemy that will spawn in every area. If you do this, after a certain point all the bosses will die in one hit, monsters will be harder to find since they're hiding from you, and you get to fight one of the most iconic characters in recent memory, famous Mii costume Sans Undertale. However, following through this route will permanently corrupt your save file, canonically erasing the game's world from existence. But even if you restore it, the game will not be the same, making it impossible to ever get the true pacifist ending. And those are the 4 main types of multiple endings I've noticed are the most common in games. Of course, it's not an exact science. For example, Undertale can easily fit into the multiple playthrough type, and you can argue that morality is in a valid category due to it not being necessarily tied to gameplay. But there are some games that I struggle to place in any of them. Silent Hill 2 has 5 different endings, but 3 of them aren't based on player choice. More so, how they play through the entire game will decide the ending they get, which makes it hard to strive for any specific ending unless you know exactly what actions count towards it. Near sequel Automata has many endings, a lot of them being gag endings, but the main story ends 5 times. But each subsequent ending either continues the story from the last one or shows a completely different perspective, even making you play as different characters. And while it does have elements of Find the Thing, since you need to collect all the weapons to get all the endings, that one isn't even a main story ending, more so a secret boss, so does it count? I want to make it clear that this is not a definitive ruling that you can apply to every game with multiple endings under the sun. A lot of them might fit into many categories or none. Consider this a fun thought experiment on how there are multiple endings, multiple ways. Hey, it's me, Unscripted Dagon. I decided I may as well use this little space for something. You got your video recommendations or whatever. Jesus, what the fuck? Like what the fuck? The video got 3,000 views? I was not expecting that. I haven't really updated in like a year. So I was expecting it to get maybe 50, or if it did really well, like 100. But man, I was really surprised with all the conversation it arised from it. So yeah, I mean, that was cool. I'm gonna try to be more consistent and, be doing more topics. I don't want everything to be super serious or about the state of art or whatever. The next one will be, though. So be on the lookout for that. Well, yeah, that's all I had to say. Bye.